Hello, all you textual deviants, and welcome to another edition of Texting with me, Tomek, in St. Petersburg.
And me, Mark Will in Taipei.
All right, um, I'm drinking coffee. I'm on my fourth.
And I'm drinking tea
Yeah, still bright
after
here.
midnight on a Friday. Actually, it's after 1 a.m.
Nice. It's 8 p.m. Still bright here. And as I was just telling you off air, I've got 11 days of holiday coming up, which is hopefully it won't be one of those like idle times for the devil of playground type stuff. Sometimes my brain goes in bad directions when I'm not super busy, but I'm going to try to stay productive, even if it's holiday, and maybe we'll do some extra podcasting, like to do some reading, some watching.
And you were saying
So,
that's for spring break and Victory Day?
yes, which
What
is
is that exactly?
commemorates World War II, and it's like a critical source of propaganda for the Russian government is just always make sure that that is living vividly in the Russian psyche.
Is it a particular day, like
May
April,
9th.
May 9th? Okay.
Yeah. So we'll have all the
You mean the U.S.
parades.
You mean the U.S. didn't win World War II by itself?
Right. Well, that's another way of looking at it. But yeah, they have a tradition of marching with pictures of relatives that they lost, and even Putin marched last year with uh,
Mm-hmm.
with one of these portraits. So for me, it
Hmm.
mainly means allergy season because this is like the peak of the allergy season for me, and the birch tree is blossoming.
Oh,
So I've got a nice arsenal of inhaler, eye drops, nasal sprays, antihistamines, and as long as I've got them at the ready, I usually manage. But if any of those run out, I'm in dire straits.
right.
And how was your trip to the Philippines?
It was good. I mean, it was short, just a couple of days in and out, but I saw Manila for the first time, and then we went to the resort town of Tagaytay. So,
And you
um,
said you might be returning soon?
yeah, we might go back next month, but
Different agenda
we'll
this
see.
time, next time, or
Not sure yet. Maybe more of Manila, maybe up north to Baguio. We'll see how things go. But I'm in a good mood today because I just picked up from the local printer a paperback copy of my latest book, Ernest Games. I'm showing it on camera if you're watching on video.
it looks fantastic. It's a really cool cover.
Um, yeah, you can see the spine there and the back. I'm pleased with it. So it's available on Amazon, but if you're in Taiwan, well, you can have a signed copy from directly from me, from the author. Wouldn't that be
Very nice.
amazing? Yeah. The
Great,
book is
great.
Ernest Games, by the way, if you're not watching the video.
Sweet.
What are we talking about today?
Yeah, so today we're taking a request from Liliana Muhammedzianova, uh, and she has requested an episode of the wildly successful Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm.
Curb Your Enthusiasm, the creation of Larry David, who's famous as the mastermind behind Seinfeld. It's finished its 11th season, and its 12th season is in the production stages, meant to come out at some point this year. And rumors are quite consistently saying that this will be the last season, which is a bit disappointing, but fair enough. You know, artistically, maybe it's time for him to try a different venture. So I'm sure we'll be discussing the show as a whole, but we are going to also specify one episode, which is the shrimp incident. And Mark, do you have the episode details in front of you as far as the exact?
It's season 2, episode 4.
That's right, season
say.
2, episode 4.
Okay.
So early days, because as I was watching a variety of clips leading up to our discussion today, I did notice that the show, I feel, improved to some extent over time.
I noticed that too. It's like they're still trying to, in season 2, they're still trying to figure out exactly how they want to do it and how, the actors will relate to one another.
Right.
I think we mentioned in another podcast how, the script is very loose. They basically have a scenario and then the actors improvise. And
it's usually a 7-page script.
Oh, for the whole episode. Okay. Yeah. So I had that feeling too, like they weren't 100% confident in what they were doing. They were still feeling their way. But it's a great episode.
This episode is great. Yeah, just the
many hilarious moments.
Yeah, and I think just the setup and the situations drive this episode so that it doesn't really rely so much on the kind of tenor between the actors.
I should point out that I watched, I mean, like soon after they came out, I watched the first probably 3 or 4 seasons, like in their entirety. But after that, I didn't have access to HBO and
Russian websites.
Yeah, and it wasn't on any of the streaming platforms that I have access to. So I am not up to date. Although I know I've watched enough clips to know basically what's gone on in later seasons,
Yeah, I think the YouTube channel that I usually watch with these clips, it's really conveniently set up so that the link at the end says next video. You just click that. So I think
curb your tube, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think I've watched all 12 seasons predominantly on YouTube, but it's like hard for me to find something I haven't watched now just through that.
Right,
right. And I was checking today the synopses of season 11, and I realized that I'd seen the most recent one that's been put out. So I haven't, which I was kind of grateful for in a way. I mean, but yeah, so quick plot summary of this episode. And of course, we highly recommend that you watch the episode in tandem with your listening to this episode. I will link in the description a nice Russian website. By the way, just a very quick side note, I am impressed with the Russians' ability to both organize files and also put them out very quickly. So, for example, I'm also watching Ted Lasso right now, and the episode will be up on a Russian website within 24 hours of its release on Apple TV. Not only will it be up, but it will usually have Russian subtitles, and even in some occasions, it will already have been dubbed, which is crazy. Like, it's not like Russians only got 160 million people, so I'm just surprised that has enough power to get this, this produced so quickly. But anyway.
Right. Well, I noticed that the English subtitles were very good,
So yeah, this episode is called The Shrimp Incident. Should we just kind of go through it? And
well, what is the shrimp incident?
Okay, the shrimp incident is that Larry orders Chinese takeout for himself and Cheryl, and goes to collect it, brings it back home, and realizes it's the wrong order. So Cheryl sends him back to get the right order. He comes back to the Chinese restaurant and discovers that he's actually swapped orders with Alan Wasserman, who's the president of HBO, both in reality and in the show. The overlap there is something I'm sure we'll talk about at length. And yeah, they say hello. They chuckle about the incident. They both allegedly get their correct orders. Larry comes back, excited to eat. He's ordered, I think, the Kung Pao shrimp,
Mm-hmm.
and he opens it up. He's ready to dig in, and he notices that there are only 3 shrimp in the box, and
Mm-hmm.
immediately he smells a rat, and suspects that Wasserman has nicked the remaining shrimp, which he assumes should be around 10. That's what he expects a usual portion to have. So
And he finds out later that there's a strict policy of 11 shrimp
exactly.
per order.
So we're inclined to believe Larry that it's not just his paranoia, but he actually is onto something there.
Well,
And
there's
this,
another reason to suspect that, like when Larry confronts Wasserman at HBO, and the reason they're there is because he and Julia Louis Dreyfus are pitching a
aka
new
Elaine from Seinfeld.
exactly pitching a new comedy that is Larry's concept. And before they even discuss the show, Larry asks Wasserman, "So, how were the garlic noodles?"
Well, you probably need to explain why he brings it up though in the first place. He doesn't just do it. He only levels that. Yeah,
Ah, I see. You mean after Wasserman sarcastically asks him, "So, how's your stepfather? Is he
exactly. He
better
made
now?"
miraculous recovery.
Right. And I remember this was in the pilot episode. He had planned, like Larry had planned a comedy special with HBO, and then he saw like the set that they had created, and he didn't like it. He wasn't feeling it, so he said, "I got to get out of this." And that's when he told that story about his imaginary stepfather.
Right, right,
So he's outraged that Wasserman doubted his story, but in fact he had good reason to doubt the
right,
story because Larry doesn't actually have a stepfather. But
right,
nevertheless, it is this sarcastic remark which triggers Larry to confront Wasserman about the shrimp, right? So, but he starts by saying, "So, how are the garlic noodles?" And then, Wasserman says, "I didn't touch your garlic noodles," which is a strange thing to say, right? Like, no one said you did. And that's exactly how Larry responds. "No one said you did, but you did touch the shrimp, didn't you?" And so everything begins from that.
right, right. Yeah, and along with that, we've got a secondary story revolving around Larry's use of the word cunt.
The dreaded C word.
Yeah, so
Because we're all children and we can't say actual words. We just have to, give the first letter.
yeah, I mean, I even hesitated right now, but I just said, we're going all in. So yeah, I mean, lots of little subplots, lots of more just situational things that we can laugh at, and I think we should just kind of go through the episode, and I don't know. There's so many things we can talk about, Kurt, but should we just go
Sure.
through the episode first?
Yeah. But I was going to say, there's another episode that deals with the C word. Do you remember Beloved Aunt?
No.
The
I may
episode
when you remind
Beloved
me,
Aunt.
but
Well, Cheryl's, I guess it's Cheryl's aunt. And for those of you that don't know, Cheryl is Larry David's wife in the series, played by Cheryl Hines, who is married to, do you know?
Yeah, Robert J. Kennedy, right?
RFK Jr. Yeah, the future president of the United States. So she's the future
Cheers
first
to that.
lady in 2024. Um, that's an interesting
It is
connection,
interesting,
isn't it?
absolutely, especially because he's so wildly derided in many circles
His
for arguing
vaccine
exactly
skepticism and
right.
activism. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that doesn't make her popular in many circles. Is my point,
Mm,
especially in Hollywood circles, where they were some of the loudest advocates. I feel for
lockdowns and
yeah, it doesn't seem like
mandates.
that. I mean, maybe that's not 100% true, but it seems like
Right.
that was the
Yeah.
established.
Yeah. Well, I don't know where we were going with this, but oh yeah. So Cheryl's um I think it was Cheryl's aunt passed away, and they asked Larry to take
Ah, I remember this now. I do
yeah,
remember this.
it was like the obituary
Right,
notice,
the obituary.
and he turned it in, and they misprinted it, right? Instead of
Right.
beloved aunt, AUNT, they they printed it beloved cunt,
Right.
CUNT. So
That was
that,
amazing.
that's a they've played with that word multiple times in this series.
Yeah.
The C word. Okay, so yeah, let's go to the beginning scene. Larry and Cheryl are at home and talking about going out to dinner, and then they have what's called the drink argument. What's that about?
Yeah, so I think the plan was to go out to eat, but on the way Cheryl wants to stop somewhere to have a drink, and Larry is just, it blows his mind like why a person would want to make a whole separate occasion of having a drink.
Why
Um
go to a different place when you can just have a drink at the restaurant?
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think
And
that
this is the
amused.
kind of thing that Larry gets worked up about. These trivial things that shouldn't necessarily be important. What's the big deal? Your wife wants to go have a drink someplace else first, so just do it and then go to the restaurant. But he insists on knowing why, and if he can't understand it and it doesn't make sense, he's going to protest.
Well, I think it's more about the hassle, though. It's not
Well,
even right.
yeah,
It's just like
yeah.
he, yeah, he wants to keep things simple. Um, so I don't know. I mean, Liliana wanted to know, I think, just what we made of that, in the sense of like, are we the type of people who are eager to go for that drink? And
Well, I like to go, like, if I'm having dinner. I don't usually go someplace for a drink or an aperitif before dinner, but sometimes I'll have dinner at a restaurant and then want to go to a different place for dessert. And that actually comes up at the end of the episode, right? There's kind of a
right,
revisitation of this
right, exactly.
this uh, hopping from one venue to another. But I like doing that just for a change of scene. And, you know, Larry would counter by saying, but just get dessert here. We're already here. Just order dessert. Well, I want to go to a different spot and, you know, see something else and maybe get a dessert that's not offered at this restaurant.
I mean, yeah, and I think the obviously the main issue here is marriage, and how kind of how the
Things are
romance.
negotiated.
Well, more for me is more you're not as motivated to go on elaborate dates, and I think like I'm guilty of that for sure. So it's like, yeah, early on when you're dating someone, it's all about setting up a cool night with different stops and so on.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
later on, you're
Julia
just kind of like, yeah,
Well, Julia Louis Dreyfus brings this up because Larry is discussing it before the meeting with Wasserman, right? He's like, hey, let me ask you guys a question. He's talking to Jeff, his manager, uh, Julia, Julia Louis Dreyfus, and Julia's British assistant. I don't
Manager.
manager. Yeah, I don't know who she is, but um, as a character. But anyway, that's the part she plays in this episode. And so he asked them. He's like, "What's the point of that?" And then you know, Julia. I almost said Elaine's theory. Julia's theory is, well, maybe Cheryl wanted to get laid because
Exactly.
Jeff said people only do that when. I mean, Jeff agrees with Larry. He's like, yeah,
Right.
totally pointless. You only do that if you're trying to get laid. And then
Right.
Julia says, well, maybe Cheryl was trying to get laid. Did you ever think
Right.
about that?
Right. Yeah. So I think it's one of those things that, like, I mean, like, obviously we're playing on a lot of stereotypes here, but the woman wants to continue to be romanced. The man gets lazy,
Mm-hmm.
and like I said, I'm totally guilty of that. Like when I'm traveling, for sure, I'm all about it. But in general, going to a restaurant is a big enough deal. I feel like it's like a date enough where it's like we go out and there's a restaurant. It's like yes, I feel like I've accomplished the date. But then to make it a multiple stop thing, sometimes you just kind of want to get on with it. And we're more once we're in marriage mode, we're more like maybe a bit in a way more about ourselves and our own projects.
Right.
So yeah. Uh, so next we have the
Well, how does
shrimp
that end
incident,
up?
right?
How does that end up? There's an
Yeah, so
argument.
it ends up with Cheryl says, "Let's just get takeout," and Larry's perfectly happy with that as the final solution.
I like the way they argue, the way they communicate with one another. Cheryl often just looks at him and says, you know, just forget it. And
Right,
then,
right.
and then, that's the end of it. It's like, okay, fine. You want to just do takeout? Yeah, just do takeout. Fine. So there's a kind of compromise that they eventually reach, and not just in this
But
episode, but in
Larry
others
sees it
as
as a
well.
win, though, in a way, because actually, like, takeout is like even better than going to a restaurant. It's like
Yeah,
less
yeah.
hassle.
Well, that's true. Although
So,
it didn't end up that way, it was more of a hassle.
right, right. But his initial reaction is like, great. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, it is funny though. I mean, I do think that this again mirrors my relationship where it's often just like, yeah, let's just get some takeout, or
Hmm.
let's like order delivery.
Yeah.
But that can have a certain sweetness too, in terms of just like the comfort to do that.
Yeah.
Uh, so then we get the shrimp incident, which we described. And I guess a couple things I wrote. Do you want to discuss the music now? Because like I was taking notes through the episode, and like
The
the
theme,
music is just
the
amazing.
you mean the music that he discovered while watching a commercial for an Italian bank?
Is that the story behind the music?
That's what I heard. Yeah. I saw like the commentary for the season 1 DVD set long ago. And I think that's where he was talking about. I know I've seen an interview where he it was just like some Italian bank commercial. You're talking about da 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 da
Yeah.
da da da. Yeah, that's what it's from. I just jerked the uh, earbud out of my left ear.
So
Yeah,
it's he just paid copyright and he's using a
I
completely
think
different.
so. I think so. And then there's the other version.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. There are so many like variations, and I'm wondering if they're actually if they're all linked because some of
I
them
think
have
they
this
are.
very like Hebrew vibe to it. It's kind of like did you notice that? It's a very like Jewish sounding. I wish I had like had all the songs now in front of me, but they're all great. I mean, they're all stuff that I just want to do the conducting arms to.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that it's been like used now for meme culture, right? So like every one of my students knows that track, but they don't know Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh, no, I
Yeah,
didn't
so
know
like,
that.
oh, absolutely. This is to the point where in any situation, like for a kind of facepalm situation, people can just start singing that. Like I taunt my
Which
students
one?
now.
Da 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 da
Yeah,
da 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 da
exactly.
da.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So it's like, um, so yeah, that's really one of the biggest impacts of the show in a way on culture outside of people who watch the show is that theme song,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty interesting. But I just think the music is fantastic. Like it's like such a critical element of the show. And if we talk about quality of, theme music, it's just brilliant. I mean, because Seinfeld also had pretty good music, the boom, 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 boom,
With the bass, yeah.
boom. It was pretty good, but it doesn't stand up to this,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion.
Well, I thought you were going to mention the theme to Rawhide, which for some reason he comes back from the restaurant singing.
Okay, I didn't know where that came from.
Yeah, it's just an old American TV show, like a Western show. So why is he singing Rawhide?
And then in the last scene, he's singing something. Do you know what he's singing at that
I
point?
yeah, I don't remember what that was, but I know what
Okay,
you mean. He pulls up in the car and he's wearing a baseball cap, and this is after the social service
right,
worker is visiting and asking Cheryl if she wants to press charges, and then
right,
the episode ends with her thinking pensively about it.
right, right.
That was a bit redundant. If she's pensive, of course she's thinking, but yeah. Um, yeah, I can't remember what it is he's singing, but maybe we should look into that because it could be significant. Although I don't even know what the significance of Rawhide is. It's just like a random weird thing for him to be singing, and then there's
Yeah, I think it's just meant to
no
show his
no
like
comment on it after that.
right. It's just like he's very just comfortable, right? He's just like absolutely comfortable
Mm-hmm.
with himself. And I know what I wanted to say. Like when it comes to the showdown in the studio when they're pitching, not in the studio, but in the boardroom when they're pitching the show.
Yeah.
A couple of ways we can take this, but one is I'm kind of surprised that because Larry in some way doesn't seem to have an ego. He often I feel like can't understand why other people are getting offended, right? Because he like tells it how it is. Like if you remember the episode with the water where he comments on the tap water.
Mary Steenburgen's mom.
Yeah, but either way, he's like always he says the direct thing, and he doesn't get why people get offended. So I was just kind of surprised.
Wait, are you talking about the episode where he doesn't want to drink after Mary Steenburgen's mom?
No, I'm talking about I think Marty's girlfriend serves tap water.
Oh, this is a later one.
You haven't seen that one?
I don't know what
It's
happens.
so good, and he just comments on the fact that he like takes a sip and he says, "Tap, eh?" And
Mm-hmm.
and Marty wants to like defend her, and like, but everybody else like is happy that Larry has made a comment because they're all like also not enjoying this water.
Yeah.
And then Larry ends up getting thrown out of the dinner party because he's like, you know, it's awesome. It's so good. But anyway, my point is just that, yeah, he seems like he wants to get over the social decorum. Like, let's just tell things how it is. So then I'm surprised how that character then gets so offended by being called out for the stepfather lie.
Like, but that's typical. He's always like that,
Is he though? Is his pride offended?
Yes, he always has a double standard, right? Like, I can't remember what episode this was, but at one point he's like, I don't believe in free speech for anyone except me. The First Amendment to the Constitution should have said, Larry David has the right to free speech.
Okay, can you name another time where he gets really? I don't know. I just think usually it's about him offending others, not him being offended. Right?
I mean, I think you can even go back to George Costanza, who, as everyone knows, was based on Larry himself, and that's even alluded to in this episode.
Yeah, it's funny. It's
and
funny.
he always takes offense at slights from others.
He does, but I think I'm glad you brought that up, because at this point I kind of think we may have to just abandon structure with this show and just kind of just go random, because there's so much to talk about potentially.
Sure.
But yeah, with Larry David being analogous to George, I feel like the major difference is that because we're meant to be seeing the show kind of as a documentary, Larry's obviously got so much status and prestige because of Seinfeld. Like, he is, right? We know that he must have such power in social circles in Hollywood, financial power, and that, so he can't be George, right? I mean, of course there are some elements can remain, but he's a lot cooler than George, right? I mean, I think, like, he gets beautiful women on Curb, Cheryl, but not only Cheryl, but like when he breaks up with Cheryl, there are like some pretty sexy women that he dates.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would just say that there's much less of the kind of like pitying feeling that we get from watching George. Don't you agree?
I'm not sure, because I'm thinking of an episode where he is trying to get a room in a hotel, and they're saying, "Oh, sorry, sir, no vacancies." He's like, "Come on, no vacancies? You're telling me if the Pope came here, or Frank Sinatra Jr., you would turn them away and say that there's no vacancy? Come on, I know you got a room." And they're like, "No, sorry, sir, we have no vacancy." He's like, "Look, did you ever watch Seinfeld? I'm the co-creator of Seinfeld, Larry David. You know me, right? I'm sorry, sir. No, I'm not aware of that show. I don't know you, and we have no vacancies." I think he still feels slighted,
Okay, well, maybe I'm just saying it then, us as the viewer, we experience that character differently. And his friends on the show, he's quite popular. Well, I mean, Jeff is very, very supportive, always validating whatever Larry's feeling. The Vince Vaughn character seems to be a pretty big fan. Like, he has friends. I mean, Richard Lewis, he has friends and he has a wife, so it is, and many people appreciate his candor.
But check this out, if we're talking about connections with George. After that episode in the office of Alan Wasserman, right? Elaine, Julia says, "You know what? You need serious psychoanalysis."
Right.
She's like, "What the hell was that? What's wrong with you? You really need psychological help." And it reminded me of the episode of Seinfeld when Jerry tells George, "You really have a problem. You need a team of Viennese therapists studying you around the clock to figure out what's wrong with you." I mean, I think it's the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's just harder for me to, as I said, it's harder for me to feel pity. Whereas for George, I do feel like some pity. Like, it's just easier for him to play the loser. We know Larry David's not a loser because of Seinfeld. I mean, on the show, he's like, clearly, to us anyway, we know that this dude's like a god, in a way, like a genius, comic genius.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was gonna say something else, but I forgot where I was going to go with that. So, um, should we go on to? I know what I wanted to say. Sorry. Hope we don't do that too many times. But so this concept of like meta and is just so reminiscent again of Kave, and like this show is meant to be documentary style, and if we talk about the birth of Curb Your Enthusiasm, I was watching an interview today where Jeff Garland is explaining that Jeff Garland had the idea of creating a program about the making of a program at HBO, right?
Mm-hmm.
He told Larry about that, and then that's basically where the idea for the show germinated.
And
but again, it's like
let me just stop you there and
sure,
back up for a second. You mentioned Kave, who is the creator of the show about the show,
right? Which you still haven't really watched, right?
Right, but that is
you need to.
That
please.
is like the most meta name for an artistic creation that you could come up with. The show about the show. I think during the Synecdoche, New York episode earlier this season, we were talking about meta and trying to define it. And I think I said it's something about something else. No, it's something about itself, right? It's, for example, the show about the show, or the play about the play, or the movie about the movie, or the movie about the play. I may have confused matters even further.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, I just think and I probably just end up repeating myself over and over because the same thoughts come to mind, and thankfully they still feel fresh to me. So that's the important thing. But it's almost like shows and art in general often kind of like trying to outcompete one another for a claim to authenticity, right? So it's like Curb is like, okay, well, Seinfeld still feels a little bit too cute in a way, maybe in the way that we wrap it up in our episodes. We're on NBC, so we can't cuss. And so Curb's gonna be like the cooler version. We're gonna be on HBO, and script much less.
As Julia says, you can say fuck and cocksucker on HBO.
Exactly.
And by that alone, you're doubling the laughs. That's what Larry's comment is.
Right, which I think is a good quote, and I think is like pretty, to some extent, true.
Mm-hmm.
Although maybe you could argue that like the real skill then is getting laughs without.
Well, that's what some people like about Jerry Seinfeld. He's clean.
Right.
He doesn't drop F-bombs every 5 seconds.
Actually, that is pretty cool about Jerry. He plays his part. Because he doesn't do it like sanctimoniously, which I think, and he's it's just his vibe. But no, I just wanted to say, like, so they're basically playing themselves. Often they're just like changing a surname, like with Cheryl's case,
mm-hmm.
right? Richard Lewis is Richard Lewis.
Jeff Garland is Jeff Green.
Yeah, and they're trying to do this mainly through improvisation rather than through script.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I'm just saying, like, if that is the gold standard, then we have to give Kave his props again, because Kave's done it. Kave's been willing to go further, because he's like, no, like, my whole life will be the show, and like, I will absolutely be living my suffering with you. I will get divorced because of my show on the show.
Right.
Like, to the point where I have to hire someone to play my wife because my wife is no longer, so it's just like insane levels.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to shout out Kave again for willing to really sacrifice himself for his art,
Mm-hmm.
That's all. I don't know if you want to add anything about that aside.
Well, I mean, you mentioned authenticity. I was asking myself, is Curb Your Enthusiasm transgressive? Is it revolutionary? Or is it just entertainment, Like, it certainly violates taboos,
Yeah.
but I mean, can we consider it transgressive? Uh, is that important? Is it truly revolutionary, or is it just an amusement? Because, like, I was thinking, I would like them to do an episode on, I can imagine them doing an episode on QR codes in restaurants. Now, a lot of places are asking people to scan the
Yeah.
QR codes to access the menu. You can't even
Yeah,
get,
they don't even have
they don't
menus.
even have paper menus, And, like, I can imagine Larry David having an argument with the waiter or something like, what do you mean? You don't have a menu anywhere? Nowhere back there.
Right.
I can
Right.
go back there into the kitchen. You're telling me there's no menu? You don't have a
Right.
menu. Really?
Right.
No, I didn't. How about this? I didn't bring a phone. So what? I can't eat here unless I have a smartphone with me?
Right.
And that
Exactly.
and that would be, like, I think, potentially revolutionary, because you're really challenging something that's important. Because, in my opinion, this whole move toward that kind of thing is an attempt to control us and move us towards a you know CB, what's it called, centralized bank digital currency, CBDC, right? Like, everything's going to be on your phone, and everything's going to be digital, and you can't use cash, you can't look at
Maybe, but
anything
I
on
don't think individual
paper.
restaurants are making the decision to go paperless, for that reason. You might be right as like what's dictating the overall direction, but I would just say like an individual restaurant just does that because
Because what?
it's
What are they
convenient.
doing?
Because
They want you to sign up for their fucking direct marketing, and they want to have your data, which they
no,
sell to
because
other people.
a lot of times it doesn't involve any like consent stuff. It's just you do it and you get a PDF of the menu or you get the website directly.
So
So
what's the point of that?
the point is you reduce on paper and it's just like a little bit easier for them in a way. They don't have to deal with menus. It's just like I mean, I don't really mind it. Like, I don't when I don't necessarily love it, but it's like I'm over it. Like I
Okay, well, I'm more of a Larry David than you in this instance, because I'm not over it. I find it absurd. It's like, I don't know what it was like there, but at one time here in Taiwan, we were fucking scanning QR codes just to go into, like, a 7-Eleven. They're, like, keeping track of everyone that goes in and out.
yeah
And what if you don't have a phone, so you can't go in there and get food? And then some places had, like, sign-in sheets. Like, people are going to do that. Oh yeah, I'm here. Here's my phone number. Or
yeah. They
you
were
can.
doing that in London when I was there. Not recently, but during the height of COVID. You had to kind of write down all your information in a restaurant's book, and I don't know exactly how that was being, but there was some sort of tracking system going down. I guess so that if you got COVID, then they would be able to see where you were or something. I don't know, but
Well, that's the official reason, but who knows?
yeah. Um,
I mean, you had those. This is an old story, but you had, like, places where on one side of the street people are eating outside, and then right across the street the mom and pop store was forced to shut down, and they can't have outside dining.
and
that's
then but they
clearly
can
that's
allow
clearly not a health concern. Something else is
right, or
going
they would
on.
let people get into crammed subways just because they had no alternative.
Yeah.
That was always like really funny to me. Just like how I would get out of a packed like sardines public transport only to then have to like do all this crazy social distancing. But anyway, yeah, I think on that note, I think just considering the politics of Curb is interesting, right? Because again, Curb on one hand is deeply rooted in Hollywood liberalism, right?
Yes.
Like you've got, but on the other hand, it does seem like it's very happy to laugh at woke, quote unquote, woke
Oh, for
culture.
sure. Remember when he wears the Trump hat so
Right, that's
people
what comes to mind.
yeah, so
Exactly.
people will leave him alone. Like he doesn't want to interact with certain people, so when he sees them coming, he puts on the Trump hat and they're like, "What?" And then he's like,
Yeah, but
"Good."
what's interesting though is like, I feel like Larry manages to kind of play it safe there, like in that episode a little bit, for example. Like that was hilarious and a great premise, but it's like it's funny because I mean he's not. It's kind of safe too. Is my only point. It's like he hasn't in any way like really embraced Trump. I'm not. Of course, he shouldn't. I'm not saying he should, but he hasn't really. He hasn't really said anything that would offend the again the woke mob, right? I mean, because they would be like, yeah. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't want. I don't know. It's just, and I think even his friends were like, why are you wearing that, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, uh that dates back to the Bush years. There was an episode in which he was trying to fuck this woman, but then she confessed that she was a George W. Bush supporter, and he was telling Jeff, I don't think I can sleep with her because she said she loves Bush." And then Jeff said, What are you talking about? Are you crazy? I'll fuck her if she's wearing a Bush mask. I don't care."
Really? So Larry suggested that that was a turnoff.
I think so. That was like an early episode. I mean, that again, that's
No,
like
that's just
Bush
interesting
era.
because today I was reminded of the Palestinian chicken episode. Do you know that one?
I've seen a clip when
And like
Funkhauser doesn't want to go into that Palestinian place.
yeah, and Larry said that the whole birth of the show comes from him thinking about whether would he fuck a Palestinian woman, and like there was no doubt in his mind that he would.
Mm-hmm.
And so and it goes further. He's like, would I still do it if she was shouting anti-Semitic slurs at me the whole time during? And he's like, yeah. So I'm just saying, I'm surprised that he would. On one hand, he's like ready to to deal with all that, but yeah, I think that maybe that's a segue to the cunt conversation because, as you would say, we're 48 minutes in. So, um, yeah, this is like, and that's interesting because this is season 2, and so that means that this was shot I think in like something like a long time ago. I don't know if we could pull up a date. It would be great if we could like very quickly. I think it's like 2003 though. Let's just say that, and we'll be wrong by a year or two maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But if this is 2003, so this predates cancel culture like significantly.
Your lighting is
But
pretty dark, by the way.
I understand. Yeah, I can pause if you want. We can pause it, or
I'll just keep
and I
going.
can go turn on the light. Yeah. So I don't know. I just think that this is like either foreshadowing cancel culture, or I mean, I just wonder how this episode would take place now, right? Like it's.
Well, I mean, yeah. Do you want to even
Can you set up
discuss
this?
the?
Why don't you set up how this happens, and I will go turn on the light, and I'm sure that that will be enough time.
Okay,
Is that all right?
I'm
Yeah.
gonna talk to the darkness.
Talk to the darkness.
Yeah. Well, Larry and Cheryl are invited to a poker game at Julia Louis Dreyfus and Brad Hall's house, and it's couples. So Julia Louis Dreyfus and Brad Hall, they're a couple. They're married, SNL alumni, and oh yeah, that's much brighter. And Cheryl and Larry show up, and then there are two other couples. There's a dentist and his wife, and uh, I guess an executive from HBO and his wife. And this executive, he's mentioned earlier, Michael somebody, and then Larry says, "Oh, the gay guy," and Julia says, "No, he's not gay. He's married. What are you talking about?" As if you can't be gay and married, you know.
Right.
Uh, but you know,
He's a great actor, by the way. He plays the part so well.
yeah. Well, you know, there's some debate about whether he is an effeminate heterosexual or actually gay. And so at the poker game, um, Julia bets. I mean, she calls the bet, right? And no one else
Did you
will.
already say that they were playing 2-card stud?
Oh no, but that's
Okay.
but thank you. That's the game. And so, you know, with 2-card stud, and there's another name for it too. It's like, uh, what did he call it? Brad Hall calls the game. Not
I don't
sweat,
know.
not sweat or
Oh, guts.
guts. Yeah, right. Like you have to have guts to uh, play this game because the pot increases pretty quickly, right? So you know you could easily lose your shirt, as they say. Uh,
Hey, it relies on bluffing more than other games because there's just you don't get a chance to get any cards from the dealer. It's just you only have 2 cards, so it's not like you're really gonna have. Yeah, I don't know.
I think
Yeah,
you can ask for. I mean, you can discard.
no,
And, well,
in
they
stud you can't. That's the whole point of stud. You
but
get 2 cards and that's it.
maybe it was
No,
maybe it was another hand that I saw. But okay,
yeah, they
regardless.
switched to it right at the end.
Yeah.
They switched to
Okay.
this.
Well,
Yeah.
regardless, um, yeah, bluffing is important, as you say, and Julia actually is bluffing. No one knows that at the time, but you know, uh, she calls or makes the bet, and no one else will call. Everyone else is out. They fold.
And her husband and people are like, "Come on, somebody, don't let her just."
Somebody, and then
Yeah.
it's to the effeminate heterosexual, the gay married guy, and he says, "Oh, I'm out," and then so
He hesitates for a while.
Julia takes the pot, which is what, $700 or $800 or something,
Yeah.
pretty significant, and you know, Larry says, "What'd you have?" And then she had nothing, like a 2 and a 4 or whatever it was, you know, shit. And so Larry goes around the room. What'd you have? And it gets to Michael, and he's like, "Oh, I had an ace high," which of course would have won. And then Larry says, "Oh, you cunt! You didn't play, you cunt!
What a cunt!
What a cunt!" So that's how it begins, and the reaction of, I mean, this is potentially offensive to the woke mob. You know, actually, the people at the game are kind of members of the woke mob. You know,
Well, that's what I mean. But it predates. It predates it, as we know.
Yeah, yeah. But you can imagine people like that now. That is unacceptable in a game, a decent game, as one of them says.
Right.
And then the dentist says, "That is misogynist. I'm offended by that. That is not okay. That is unacceptable." And poor Michael is pretty upset. Wincing.
He like actively is kind of doing this like squeezing thing,
like someone bitch.
He wrinkles his face
like
together.
Someone bitch slapped him.
That's my favorite, I think, moments.
Yeah,
it's just, and his wife consoling him.
Yeah, his beard consoling him.
Oh man.
Well, and you know, spoiler alert, Michael may actually be gay, because although it's not explicit, but at the end,
it's very explicit.
Cheryl and Larry are at it. Well, there's no comment made about it. We just see,
right, but
we're
see
him
meant to get that.
Sure, but it could be misinterpreted, right? Like maybe it's a client, but yeah, it doesn't look like that. It looks like it's a date. And before that, we're told that Michael took a leave of absence, and he was
to reflect.
to reflect, and he was traumatized. So the implication is that by calling Michael a cunt, Larry, uh, forced him to confront his latent homosexuality.
Yeah, like he says, maybe in retrospect I should have said pussy.
Yes, right.
Yeah. I thought he was one of those effeminate homosexuals.
Heterosexuals. Effeminate heterosexuals, yeah.
All right.
Well, and then...
So that's the most memorable scene for me from this episode. I mean, I think that's...
Well, see,
what's really funny is, just a little quick thing, is like I told my colleague Tom today, another Tom, that we were doing this episode. And... I told him that we were doing a show on Curb.
Yeah.
And it's funny that this is the first episode that came into his mind.
Really?
And then I told him, we're doing... Yeah, and particularly this scene. And then I told him, we're doing that exact episode. So even if I'm not sure, like, where this episode ranks in, like, the overall pantheon, but this scene, I think, it stands out. Like, it's one of the top scenes in terms of just hilarity and memorability.
Okay.
Is that a word? Memorability?
Could be.
Okay.
For me,
Seems to be.
If I had to pick like my favorite all-time scene, it would be the first meeting with Crazy Eyes Killa.
Okay, that's a good one for sure.
But also maybe Leon telling Larry to get in that ass.
Leon is just such a great addition to the show. I mean, he's a very talented actor.
Yeah.
Especially, again, because I think a lot of his most hilarious rants are improvised to some extent, Like, he just says crazy shit, and he's like, I'd like to learn more about him. I told you, this is another aside, but I've developed a really strong affection for the Richard Lewis character.
Yeah, you did tell me that.
But my connection with him is exclusively through this show. I've tried to do a little bit of exploration and I can't get into it, or I just like...
See,
I found this one really weird... last thing. I found this one really weird interview with like Howard Stern, and I just didn't really get the vibes. I don't know. Tell me about Richard Lewis.
Well, I mean, I've known Richard Lewis since the 80s when I would see him on...
As a fan.
Yeah, I liked him. I mean, I
mean, not personally.
Yeah, right. I've known of him since the 80s when I saw him on Letterman. He was a frequent guest on Late Night with David Letterman, and he would always come out and he would just be ranting, and he would always touch his forehead and say things like, yeah, he was hilarious. It was always the something from hell. Dave, it was the dinner from hell. And that was like one of his catchphrases. And one of the most hilarious things he said was like, I'm trying to take responsibility. I don't want to blame other people for my problems. I've finally come to realize that everything is my parents' fault.
Right.
I didn't deliver that well, but it was something like that. You think he's genuinely taking personal responsibility, and then he says it's all due to how his parents fucked him up.
And I think, this might be another moment to mention the fact that this is like absolutely steeped in like Jewish humor. So
absolutely,
we've got the Richard Lewis character, we've got Larry David, we've got Seinfeld, we've got Larry David saying that his biggest influence is Woody Allen. So
who said that? Seinfeld did?
Larry David.
Yeah,
Larry David.
No doubt about it. I mean, are you a big Woody Allen fan?
I'm not a. I don't know his repertoire much. I know the flavor, and like I've seen a couple movies and I like them, but I don't. My knowledge is not that deep.
See, I've been a Woody Allen fan since I was a teenager. I think the first thing I saw was Zelig, and yes, it's very that's an obvious influence. I thought at first you said Seinfeld was uh, influenced by Woody Allen. No, I think Seinfeld comes from the Bill Cosby school of observational comedy, but Larry
Mm,
David is definitely, uh, you know, he reminds me of Woody Allen and Philip Roth to a certain extent, who is not a comedian, but he's a great comic, Jewish comic writer, satirical writer, and novelist. Um, yeah, there are many parallels there. And did you know that he actually appeared in a Woody Allen movie? Larry David
oh,
did.
really?
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it now. It's not anything else, but I don't know. We can look that up later. But yeah,
Well, I was just
he
gonna say,
he
like,
plays. Okay,
no, go
here's
on. Yeah.
one reason why we might say that, and Philip Roth does this too. It's like every character is a kind of aspect of the author's personality. Um, you get that in the
Every
novels
Philip
of,
Roth character.
yes, but also every character, every like protagonist of a Woody Allen movie is,
Mm,
you feel like he's writing himself or some aspect of
sure,
himself.
sure.
And what's going on with Curb Your Enthusiasm? Same thing. Like it's
Well,
it
I'm
is it
confused
is
though,
like
because
the most hyperbolic version of Larry David. I think Seinfeld once said the real Larry David is even more insane than the George Costanza character or the Larry David character on, you know,
yeah,
Curb.
yeah,
But he's
and that's comforting to some extent, right? I mean, it's comforting for me that if that Larry hasn't like let fame make him somehow self-satisfied
mm-hmm.
or even happy. It's comforting that it hasn't made him happy.
Well,
It's like grounds him. That's what makes us appreciate him, right? It's like
well.
the tragedy aspect.
There's a certain Jewish neuroticism.
Right,
Uh,
right.
if we're talking about all three of them, uh, Woody Allen, Larry David, Philip Roth, like
Oh, I thought the third was going to be Richard Lewis.
well, you absolutely he should be included too, and maybe maybe the others, uh, Bob, what's his name, Bob Einstein, who plays
It's good that you
Funkhauser,
mentioned that.
and and
Ah, yeah, yeah, okay.
his, do you know who his brother is?
No.
Albert Brooks, who also appears in Curb as Albert Brooks.
Okay.
Why did he change his name? Because he was born Albert Einstein.
Okay.
So his stage name is Albert Brooks. But that's actually Bob Einstein's brother, the late Bob Einstein's brother.
Ah,
And
that makes a little bit more sense now because I was just watching this thing today and they were saying how Albert Einstein always makes you laugh. They were like talking about Larry, and I just like what I had no idea what that meant. So now it you made it a bit more clear.
he was talking
Does that
about
make
Albert
sense?
Brooks.
Well, somehow I just heard this sentence in this interview with the Curb cast where someone looked at Larry and said, "Oh, Albert Einstein always makes you laugh."
Oh, okay.
So
And
he
you
must have been talking about,
think he was
and I was just like, "What?"
mentioning Albert, or alluding to Albert Brooks.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, I didn't know about that connection. I knew about Albert Brooks from like SNL and also his movies. He had a really entertaining movie in the late 70s or early 80s called Real Life, and it was supposed to be a movie about a movie, but it's like a mockumentary, right? So
Mm.
this has been done before. Maybe that was an influence on Curb, actually, now that I think about it. But that was Albert Brooks back in the late 70s and early 80s. Um, and then
I
his
don't know if this is a
brother,
thread. Go,
well,
go.
Bob Einstein was the character Super Dave Osborne. Did you ever see him? He was also a frequent
Mm-mm.
guest on Letterman. All of these guys were on Letterman, you know. Well, the idea was he played like this evil Knievel type character, and he would show video clips of himself doing all these impossible stunts, and he would always get injured horribly, and he'd say, "Stop the clip! Stop! Stop! No, not this part! Not this part!" And it would show him getting injured. But
You have to link some of this stuff,
yeah,
some clips. I was just gonna ask, like, if there is a certain particular flavor of Jewish neuroticism. It's interesting how Richard Lewis and Larry David seem on opposite sides of the spectrum, in the sense that Richard Lewis is like very much all about his emotions and his emotional state, and Larry seems like devoid of emotions, almost like autistic, right? But at the same time, they're both kind of playing on this Jewish neurotic trope. So I don't know, what do you have any thoughts about that?
I hadn't thought about that. What's an example of Lewis being in his feelings?
He's just always saying, he's always like upset with Larry for not being like a good friend or not being sensitive, and he's always referring to the fact that he's kind of traumatized from his alcoholism. And yeah, he's very much, I mean, this is something he brings up even in real life. He says that they're like this because, you know, they've actually been friends since they were 12.
Oh yeah, right.
But yeah, like, I think that's his shtick, you know, that he's like this guy who goes to therapy, is very open about his feelings. And Larry, the play between them is usually that
Larry
Larry's
is
like,
mocking everything, or
yeah, and just can't be asked, can't be bothered to indulge him at all in like the niceties. It's almost like a Cheryl Larry dynamic in that way, right? Like Cheryl wants a bit more of the coddling, and Larry's not having it.
Larry is like,
I don't
why?
know.
What's the point? That
Right.
reminds me of a line that Julia has. You know, when they walk into Wasserman's office and everyone greets everyone
Yes.
else and hugs and
Right.
kisses, and then Larry says that took like 45 minutes, and then Julia tries to play it.
45 seconds, he does say, because he actually is accurate
Oh,
about
he
it.
does. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Uh, I thought he said minutes, but Julia tries to play it off. She says, "Ah, you got to make nice. You got to make the nice," or something like that.
Right,
You know,
right.
but that
Yeah.
those niceties, as you described them aptly, he doesn't see the point of them.
Right.
He can't be bothered with them, or he at least will question them. You know.
Should we move on a little bit in the episode?
Well, what
You
else
okay
is
with
there?
that?
What else is there
Well,
to
I wanted
cover?
to point out another instance of your favorite intertextuality.
I know what you're gonna
Uh,
say.
are you? Are you sure?
Can I guess?
Yeah, let me just. Okay, yeah, guess. Go. I have a feeling you're not going to get that. You might. I would. Let me just guess the odds. Let me guess whether you're going to guess it. Um. All right, just because you seem so confident, I'm gonna like. If I was a gambling man, I'll say you will. I think you will get it, but I'm not sure
Is it at the
because it's
dentist's
kind of obscure.
office?
It is, yeah. So you're gonna get it, yeah, aren't you?
Van Gogh's Sunflowers. You
Yes,
noticed
yes.
it
Good
too.
spot. Yeah, good spot.
Yeah. And that's a callback
Um,
to an earlier episode this season when our topic was the sunflower and all its
the sunflower itself, right?
manifestations. Well, this is an important scene for me because the dentist, he notices the bruise on Cheryl's arm, which she got from a massage, but he assumes that Larry is a wife beater. And so he
Which
says,
he has good reason to.
yeah, but they're, I guess, yeah, maybe you can explain what he saw, but the line that he delivers when talking to Cheryl is classic. He says about Larry, that man is an animal
Yeah.
and he has to be stopped.
He has to be
So
stopped. Yeah.
he's saying that to the man's wife, and the man in
Right.
question, his wife,
Right. I know what I saw.
that man is
Yeah.
an animal and he has to be stopped.
Yeah.
I'll bet that's one of the specific lines that was in the 7-page script. It's like, you gotta say
Right.
this, that man is an animal and he has to be stopped.
Right.
You can do whatever else you want to do, improvise in any way you want, but you must say that exact line. And he
Right.
delivers
Exactly.
it with such sincerity, like outraged
And he
earnestness.
talked. I like when he's like, we have doctor patient confidentiality. She's like, are you in a dentist's
Dentists
office?
have that? And he's like, I think so. He doesn't even know. He just,
Oh man. Uh, I would just say, if we're close to wrapping things up now, I would say, can we just maybe hit a couple like last
yeah,
points?
whatever you want.
All right. One point is that an interesting point that the cast seem eager to emphasize is that what they think makes their show stand out is that because it's not scripted, it requires the actors to constantly be actively listening to what the other person is saying. And they said that they had this line where they say real acting is talking and listening. Right? So like if you're just memorizing your lines, then you don't really care what the other person's saying, you're just waiting for your turn to speak.
Right.
And so that is kind of a pretty interesting point because they have to be so alert and then they have to be sharp. Like I have to react to what you're gonna say and I have to try and build on it in the sense of like improv comedy. They said that one of the golden rules of improv comedy is like something like yes and. So you have to agree with what the other person said and then you have to build on it. Like not actually agree, but like agree into the act of
you have to
saying.
Incorporate what they say into what you're
Exactly.
doing and then build on it.
Yeah, so I think that really adds to the brilliance of Curb, and it's fun to watch because you know that they're more alive in the scene. It's like
Well, and
it's exciting.
it's exciting and it's dangerous. You don't know what is going to happen. It can easily go off the rails.
Right. Although even if they don't, because I think what they do is like they shoot. They said that they shoot each scene like several times, and then the editors are the ones who have to kind of clip it together into a funny.
I mean, it's not dangerous in the sense that a live performance would be, which is an interesting distinction because how Larry David got his start, like his first big gig was on the show, I think it was on ABC. It was like ABC's answer to Saturday Night Live. It was called Fridays. And
Okay.
and you can see clips of this. I never watched it at the time, but you can see clips of this on YouTube now. And it was live, just like SNL. And there was a famous scene involving one Michael Richards, who would later become Kramer on Seinfeld, right? He had worked with Larry David on Fridays, and there's like a
By the way, the JB Smoove character Leon is supposed to be. Some people say that he's an updated Kramer, but anyway.
Oh, okay. Well, he's an SNL alumnus.
Okay.
He was on the
Who?
JB Smoove. He wrote. He wasn't like a cast member, but he was on the writing staff, just like Larry David was.
Right.
And you know what Larry David did SNL, right?
Well, yeah, he did the thing where he quit and tried to come
Yeah,
back,
and
just
which
as
is
George
just as
did.
George
Right? They
did.
used
So see, that was actually
right. It's so
based
good.
on his personal experience. But anyway, you can still see it on YouTube. I think there's a scene where uh, I think who was on it? I think Andy Kaufman was the guest that week, and like people broke character and they were laughing and they weren't delivering their lines. So Michael Richards like walked off stage, grabbed the cue cards and brought them back into the scene and threw them on the table. It was like total chaos. It's
Wow.
one of the you can see it on YouTube, but it's like one of those minutes comparable to or moments comparable to when Charles Rocket said fuck on SNL, or Sherry O'Terry said, I think she said shit, and it was live.
Right.
So yeah, with Curb, they can fix the mistakes later since it's not broadcast live. So really, it's not that dangerous, but it's
Mm.
you know more authentic, and there's more. I don't know. It feels more raw.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Uh, so I'm not even a big TV person. I mean, many people claim that, I guess, but I genuinely don't think I am. But this is, I would say, this is my favorite American produced show. Especially in terms of comedy. Would you also say that?
Well, in terms of comedy, uh,
Yeah.
probably so. In terms of comedy,
It's
I mean,
just yeah.
if we're considering drama as well,
No, let's
then
stick to comedy.
yeah. I mean, I can't think of another series that's better comedy
And
series.
were you a, and how big of a Seinfeld fan
I
were
mean,
you?
I've seen every episode multiple times. Uh, although,
But do you agree that Curb is a superior
yes,
show?
yes,
Yeah, I agree. I
absolutely.
mean, I love Seinfeld. I'm just saying there's a lot more out there, obviously, in the comedy landscape, and I'm oblivious to almost all of it,
Hmm.
but I have, so it's interesting how a person like me, without sounding narcissistic, but I'm saying a person like me who's not really in touch with what's going on in comedy, TV especially, but I did latch on to this
Yeah.
and I did latch on to Seinfeld. And I wonder, I don't know, are you also in that boat or do you feel like you dabble more?
In comedy series, I mean, well, if we're not limiting it to American comedy series, then yeah, I've dabbled quite a bit. I mean, there's some great British comedy series going back to Monty Python, but also Faulty Towers. We should actually do
But that's all classic though. That's
an
classic
episode on
stuff.
Faulty Towers. Well, more recently, there's Peep Show, which is great. Have
Okay.
you ever seen that?
No, but I know what you're
Yeah,
talking
that's
about.
great. Um, so
Yeah, because I'm just wondering what else would be in a conversation about like the best comedy show being made in the last 10 years. Because I wouldn't really know, is my point,
hmm.
you know?
Well, maybe I don't know
I
either.
mean, The Office. I always say for me, UK Office and Curb are like my two.
Right.
And I know we've already gone over that, but
Those are
yeah, I
your
just wonder what else
jams.
is. Those are my jams.
Yeah.
But I'd like to expand that, so maybe listeners will have some
Well, I
suggestions
think
for
we
things
need
that
to
they really
do.
consider gems.
I think you need to be exposed to Faulty Towers. We should maybe do a
Sure,
Faulty Towers episode.
sure.
But yeah, maybe we can discuss that more uh, next time or later. Uh, we had talked about the next episode being my trip to the Philippines, but I don't know if we're going to be
Right.
able to edit all that before next week. So I'll probably
And you said we may end up kind of creating a duet or a tie up with your next trip
yeah,
potentially, right?
but I'm not sure we
Stitch up.
have enough material from this weekend getaway, but if there's another one next month, then maybe we will. So I'll probably
Mm,
call an audible uh,
okay.
for next week's episode. We'll see how it goes.
Good deal.
Anything else you want to mention before we wrap?
Just thanks again to Liliana for making a request, and we in 2 episodes time will be taking another request from Aiden for something called This Is England. So neither of us know much about it, but it's meant to be really good drama indie film from 2006.
Oh, it's a
story centers on
it's a
young
film.
skinheads in England.
Okay, I thought it was a TV
I think there's
series.
a lot going on. No, there's also a TV series.
Oh, okay.
From 2022, but I'm pretty sure Aiden wants us to focus on this 2006 film.
Well, speaking of
Yeah, which should be
intertextuality,
interesting.
there's also a Clash song called "This Is England," which I'm sure it's
Okay,
alluding to.
nice.
Um,
Yeah.
Did we answer all of Liliana's questions? I feel like she had some more for us.
Ooh, do you have them handy? Because I don't.
Well, I think she asked, "Have you ever lied to your boss?" Right? Wasn't that one of them?
Yeah, that may have been. So, do you want to tackle that question while I quickly find her questions?
The answer is hell yes, and I'll do it without hesitation.
Yeah, I found the questions. So, have you ever been in a situation where you took someone else's order in the restaurant? I feel like my parents may have, but I can't think of an instance on top
I
of my
mean,
head.
I've been brought the wrong order, but
Right,
not as takeout, right? So I just say this is not mine, and then it's removed.
right.
Or maybe I don't know. Have I ever eaten the wrong order? Not like deliberately. Maybe like I thought they were bringing me what I had ordered, and I ate it, and then found out that wasn't the right thing. Or sometimes once I was brought the wrong order, and we pointed it out, and then they said, "Oh, sorry. What do you want to do?" And I was like, "I'll just eat it." That happened before. What were the other questions?
Well, I guess so. We've tackled. Do you think it's romantic to go drink somewhere else before going to the restaurant? I think it is. I think it's nice, especially if you're traveling.
I think it can be
because you just kind of
And I mentioned going someplace else for dessert.
And to be honest, I'm a bit disappointed with like how. Again, I don't know if this is marriage or age, but like I live in a city which I know has a lot of cool bars, even clubs, and I have gotten pretty lazy. Like we do the restaurant scene to some extent, but I know that there's a lot out there which would be fun to experience in terms of nightlife. Other question, final question: have you ever accused your boss of something?
Oh, is that what it was? I thought it was, have you ever lied to your boss?
There was both.
Oh, okay.
The lying would be analogous to the stepfather, and I guess the accusation would, would be you took my shrimp.
Have you ever confronted a boss? And again, hell yes.
And that's you. And me, I'm probably much more squeamish about confrontation and conflict.
Yeah, well, I don't enjoy conflict, but, sometimes it's a question of survival. It's like, excuse me, you've overstepped a boundary here.
Do you want to elaborate? Do you remember a scene that comes to mind?
A scene or
a showdown
in my
situation.
In my personal life or my professional life. I mean,
right.
I think I've alluded to the fact that I sued an employer here, so that's like taking it to the ultimate degree. And since I had that experience, I'm aware of boundaries in a way that I wasn't before. And it's like insisting on your rights is a way perhaps of preventing it from escalating to the point that it's a lawsuit. Sometimes if you just let the person oppressing you or threatening you know that you're not going to back down and you're not afraid to stand up for yourself if you have to, then the person, the workplace bully might back off. If you call out the hostile work environment, directly.
Sure,
It
right.
can,
It can be more
yeah,
preventative from a larger blow
yes,
up.
and there are ways of doing it without being overtly, or overly hostile. Just asking a question like, so are we now saying that we must blah 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 every time we blah blah blah? Is that the new policy? Who decided this? Why were we not, just asking questions often is a way
Mm.
of dismantling stupid new policies, like, oh, okay, so how exactly do you envision us doing this? Like when a new director has some stupid idea, oh, we're going to try this. Well, I'm wondering how that's going to work. Can you explain that? And of course, they haven't thought it out, right? They want the staff to do all the work and figure it out, and then they take all the credit. I'm sure many people can relate to that kind of workplace nonsense.
Authority is just a weird thing. I mean, it's weird how I tend to kiss authority's ass, because from some like weird survival instinct where I'm like, vaguely paranoid about getting fired.
Hmm.
So like that tends to be my like, and I'm not really proud of that. I'm just keeping it real.
Right.
But yeah, just dynamics of being a boss is weird. Like the ego that comes with it. How to be a boss and not have an ego. Is it possible? It's I don't like
Oh,
it.
it's
I don't
completely
like.
unnatural. Working for other people is,
Well, I don't know about is it unnatural or unhealthy? Because
both.
like
Both.
hierarchy is probably natural to some extent, right?
Well, not among the hunter gatherers. The people that
Yeah,
tried to boss others were considered, dangerous psychopaths. But that's exactly the trait that's valued in our modern societies, right? Like the
right.
sociopaths are the ones that the highly motivated sociopaths are the ones that rise to the top.
Yeah, that's right.
And that seems like a good place to end it, on a happy note, right?
Exactly.
Sociopaths
Yes.
are ruling over us and we're all fucked. Unless we stand up for ourselves, and then maybe we'll just get fucked, a little bit later.
With our pride intact.
Yeah. And maybe they'll use lube.
All right. Thanks for tuning in. Again, we'll link to the show if you happen to have listened before you watched, but and maybe Mark will add some other links to some of the shows that he referenced.
Okay. Until next time.
Have a good week, everybody. Thanks for
Bye
listening.
bye.